Going to be the last panel of the Flood of Rights conference. It's a pleasure to be chairing this panel featuring Sohrab Mohebbi and Hito Steyer. And just the briefest possible introduction as usual. Sohrab is a writer living in Los Angeles. He's assistant curator of Red Cat, and something he doesn't like to talk about in public very much is the fact that he's a graduate of the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College. But pride of place compelled me to share this with you. Without any further ado, Sohrab, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Hello. Okay, well, thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor, and it's been really thought-provoking and amazing, everything. And so thanks to organizers, thanks to everyone who came, and everyone. Okay, I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna basically show a lot of slides and a few videos, but just want to provide a little background and how I got here and what I'm trying to do. So So for this presentation, I've revisited, edited, and expanded and rearranged sort of pieces of writing from a blog that I still somehow writing called presencedocuments.com, and in particular a post that reflected on images coming out of the Syrian unrest turned civil war. And when I started the blog, my intention was not to write about Syria at all, but rather to provide a kind of immediate commentary on YouTube images, responding to the accelerated modes of visual production that point to some kind of a live streaming of life. And the original idea for when I applied for funding for the blog was actually to write about the relationship of this kind of like citizen journalism and read it through histories of performance art, which I didn't do at all. But because shortly after I started the project, the Syrian crisis started to escalate, and for almost a year I engaged with the YouTube images of war. And there are multiple claims over and made through these images, and I've only tried to approach or hint at some possible readings, which not all the time go hand in hand, and they're at times really contradictory. I will try to present a few ideas, I have also a slideshow and a few videos that point to the complexity, not of the war in Syria, which is obviously a tremendously complicated situation, but rather the various modes of image production and tropes that we can see some of them here. Also, I will try to show a few videos that, while on one level concern the atrocities of the war, but they also have other properties that do not attempt to necessarily reduce the victims to evidence, and that is, within this flood of images, to stick with the terminology, there are particular instances that go beyond evidentiary claims and suggest complicated relationships with the medium and the visual content. So in How to Start a Battalion in 5 Easy Lessons, Gayeth Abdul Ahmed recounts the conversation between two rebel fighters in a piece he wrote for London Review of Books concerning the proliferation of battalions in Syria and the factionalism of the opposition front in what is now referred to the Syrian civil war. And I quote, "He wants to appease God, and he wants us to give him videos of all our operation. That's all, just YouTube videos," explains the young rebel who has just come to let the other rebel fighter know that he's taken away his cousins from the front, vacating a frontline post in a hill in Aleppo that his interlocutor finds an important defensive position. He has found a new source of funding to form his own battalion, and I quote, "A very good man and seeker of good deeds. He says he will pay for our ammunition, and we get to keep all the spoils of the fighting. We just have to supply him with videos." And this is from February 21, 2013. And similarly, a Guardian report on the war mentions how a civilian who provided the rebels with 450,000 rounds of ammunition and hundreds of rocket-propelled grenades, tells the rebel commander, and I quote, "All what I want from you is that you shoot a small video and put it on YouTube, stating your name and your unit and saying we're part of the Aleppo Military Council. Then you can do whatever you want. I just need to show the Americans that units are joining the council." This is for Guardian, September 2nd, 2012. There was recently an NPR report, but what I'm trying to say is there's just, maybe I just go on and showing one of the responses. How did I play that? Sorry. Couldn't see the cursor. Where are you? There is? Oh, yeah. Thank you. So this is John.
Those videos make it clear that this is not something abstract. This is not something just reported in the news which you can discard and say it doesn't matter what's happening over there. Those videos make it clear to people that these are real human beings, real children, parents being affected in ways that are unacceptable to anybody, anywhere, by any standards. This is not fantasy land. This is not some sort of...
Okay, this is John Kerry, just September 8th. This is President Obama. This is from September 10th.
Indeed, I'd ask every member of Congress and those of you watching at home tonight to view those videos of the attack. And then ask, what kind of world will we live in if the United States of America sees a dictator brazenly violate international law with poison gas, and we choose to look the other way? Franklin Roosevelt once said, our national determination to keep free of foreign wars and foreign...
There's another one I wanted to show, which I really like. It's an earlier one.
Speaking with foreign ministers from around the world about the gravity of this situation, I went back and I watched the videos that anybody can watch in the social media, and I watched them one more gut-wrenching time. It is really hard to express in words the human suffering that they lay out before us. As a father, I can't get the image out of my head of a man who held up his dead child, wailing while chaos swirled around him. The images of entire families dead in their beds without a drop of blood or even a visible wound. Bodies.
Okay, I think the point is taken. This is a New York Times, September 5th. So this is actually still from a video. But I'm not trying to sort of propose some kind of conspiracy theory that these videos are all funded, but I'm just sort of going through several different documents that some would emphasize in this. There is, I think this is actually really amazing. This is some kind of a online chat room, and then apparently a troll has infiltrated, but it's saying sound fake, no video, no happens. And then the others figure out that he's a troll. Okay. So the videos of Syrian battalion formation and army defectors provide a significant portion of the online visual repository of the war. And I've gathered a lot of these, and as you can, I will just go through them as I speak. They kind of also look like a conference setting with a laptop and a table. It's sort of like this, but varying in small details, the videos mostly follow a very simple format. A camera in a fixed position shows the commander of the rebel unit reading a statement from a laptop computer, stating that they will fight the ruling regime. They announce that they are either joining other battalions or they are forming a new autonomous fighting unit. Similarly, the defection videos follow the same format. Some of them include a close shot of the ID card of the defector held in front of the camera. the ID card is to confirm the identity of the defector and gives legitimacy to the video. Its introduction also provides an interruption in the video. There's no cuts. Usually, they just zoom in and show the ID card. But this brief interruption of the narrative by the ID card, which is an official document, however, points to the curious position of the video itself. These videos assume the form of a document, both as example, a proof, or a lesson, but also an official written instrument. The battalion, as such, does not exist without the video as the supporting document of its existence. The army defector cannot officially defect without the YouTube video. So the video assumes a peculiar form of legislative body that somewhat officiates the announcement. I want to show this one because I've seen a lot of these, and I kind of feel that this is a fake one, but it's sort of like a Jackson.
التاريخ 3/12/2011 بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تحية إلى كل شهداء الثورة السورية أنا العقيد عمر سالم النعيمي من الأمن السياسي وهذه هويتي أعلن انشقاقي عن الجيش العربي السوري بعد أن حوله بشار إلى مجموعة عصابات وقطاع طرق يقتلون ويسرقون وينهبون ويعذبون الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ دون رأفة أو رحمة بهم وانضمامي إلى الجيش السوري الحر ندائي هذا إلى كل الضباط الأحرار سرعة الانضمام وتدمير.
But I kind of have a feeling that this is not a real battalion, but rather more like a performative one. There's like several elements that if we see the other ones, we can kind of figure out that maybe there's something else going on there. So where was I? So video assumes a particular form of legislative body that somewhat officiates the announcement. To use Austin's classic formation, one can say that these videos do not only show the formation of the battalion or a defection of the commander, rather they're performative that indicate the imaging of the video as performing as action. Further, I also think like Seth Price's discussion in dispersion is interesting when he talks about the Daniel Pearl video, and he says these videos do not exist outside of the medium of their distribution and reception, and that is the internet, and are conditioned by the technology that distributes them. I also feel that maybe, and this is like a tangent, but if it wasn't for this medium, probably we would have seen more similar, something like what happened in videograms of the revolution. They had to go to the source, but rather here, everyone could have their own TV channel in a way. So the rebels highlight this and as such, the battalions do not exist without an internet presence. So the rebels highlight this online presence by reading the statement from a computer screen, by announcing the war to the internet, and through the distribution of images of the war online, the rebels attempt to capture the Syria of the internet, even if the battle over the land is proving a complicated one to conquer. I think I need to, I guess I just show a little bit more of these. And so I just want to point out that we have this fascinating combination of agents moving between streets and images, vitrines and screens, online and offline, making the location of this battle really indeterminate. In a piece called The Ground of the Image, Jean-Luc Nancy describes how the image is a battleground between the violence of truth and the truth of violence. And just paraphrase, he mentions how violence wants to leave a mark, wants to erupt into the field of vision and reveal itself in form of an image. Similarly, truth also wants to become visible. It also wants to display itself on the picture plane. It wants to unfold into an image. I quote, the difference is that the true truth is violent because it is true, whereas the other type, its thick double, is true only insofar as it is violent. In the second case, truth is reduced to the mode of violence and exhausted in that mode, whereas in the first case, violence is unleashed in the truth itself and thus contained in it. It is this truth rendered as violence that images of war tend to display, and as such define the reality according to the logic of the war. Since the beginning of the conflict, the opposition in Syria has been documenting the war from all angles and all sides, turning the battlefield as a site for image production. I want to quickly go through this. Sorry, I don't know how to. I want to show you a video that I think will somewhat show how. Anyway, I'll just. A survey of the images from the start of the uprising in March 2011 to date shows the changes in the landscape of violence and its intensification. Video of demonstrators interrupted by security forces to demonstrators getting shot, to tanks and airstrikes, a massacre, mass graves, and most recently use of chemical warfare. Watching the war online, there is no shortage of documentary evidence shedding light on the humanitarian crisis at hand and the increasing violence as the death toll rise, like officially over 100,000 people under the gaze of digital cameras. It's a rich repository for forensic experts to investigate the impact of various types of weaponry on human body and human creations. And indeed, like a blog like Brown Moses have been investigating the videos and analyzing the type of weaponry used according to both remains of armors, buildings, and people. I don't know if you're familiar with that blog, but it's really interesting sort of sorry, I have a lot of these. The videos produced by citizen journalists and opposition forces assume a double function. While they provide evidence and they extend the use of force by the Syrian army for the international viewers, they also provide sort of kind of a reconnaissance for the regime to examine the extent of which it has reached its targets and the condition of the enemy opposition forces, and also it also works as a means of surveillance. It reveals both the humanitarian condition and also the level of destruction, and if it meets the desired ends, revealing the condition but also revealing the condition of the targets. I don't know this if this is happening in Syria, but like in Iran or in the Occupy movement, the participant videos were used to identify the protesters as kind of like a precedent. There's in the least of all possible evils, A.L. Weizmann, and I think he's quoting Tom Keenan, but I'm just going to read this because I'm not sure when exactly the quotation begins. And he discusses the communicative or pedagogical dimensions of violence sustained by the gap between the actual destruction inflicted by an army and the possible destruction that an army is able to apply. And I quote, "It is through the constant demonstration of the existence and the size of this gap that the military communicates with the people it fights and occupies. Restraint," right, Weizmann, "is what allows for the possibility of further escalation." Also, I think it's significant to see how John Kerry referred to the U.S. plan for a Syrian military strike as sending a message to the regime and other like-minded powers in the world. Now, so this is a video that I wanted to show, but maybe it's too late. So now the question is how much the documentary apparatus that is capturing the violence in Syria can define and act as a measure of the aforementioned gap, and whether the production and consumption of the visual material can also develop a capacity and threshold for intensification of violence. That is, in each phase of this conflict, the visual materials have surpassed what was considered or believed as tolerable, and yet the targets of the violence have documented and distributed the images of atrocities. It is important to note that unlike many previous contemporary conflicts, it is the targets and victims who are acting as documentarians in a very, very large scale. It seems like it is through analyzing the images and sort of gauging the international and national response to them that the regime fine-tunes its use of force. But calculating proportionality and regulating the use of force in a civil war, like in the context of a civil war, however, means calculating the total number of civilians to be killed or be decommissioned to win the war. And as such, this opens up, or it leads to another dimension. Okay, am I really fast? Okay, sorry. So this opens up or leads to yet another dimension of the war, where the gap between possible and actual violence is closed and becomes a total war. At this level, war is not only about instruction and conviction of the subject and targets of violence, but rather about reconstruction of the desired subject or the total annihilation of the surplus. a testimonial released as part of the Human Rights Watch report, Torture Archipelago, released in July 2012, includes transcripts of interviews with defected soldiers. In one of these interviews, a former soldier, after recounting the case of a captured rebel who was beaten to death with batons, noted how his face was completely different before he was taken away. So, and I quote the rebel fighter, I knew it was the same person that they had brought in, but his face was now totally different because of the disfiguration. Beatings are common when we detain people, but not deaths. However, no one looks the same after we have arrested them and transferred them to general intelligence. So about a similar incident, another defected soldier in the same report said, I saw their faces as I walked by them, and their faces were disfigured from blunt force trauma. So as described by these soldiers, the exercise of force changes the appearance of the subject so that it becomes unrecognizable as a person. Torture, divorced from its religious and spiritual functions, is sort of kind of an attempt to dehumanize the subject by the use of force, turning him or her into something else that does not have the same features and somewhat, therefore not the same rights. This is achieved by disfiguring the subject and ultimately annihilating them. Once they look visually different from the torturer, she becomes unrecognizable as a member of the same species. And I think maybe this is also similar in some kind of way to what Sharon also talked about Arendt, sort of saying that these crimes are crimes, again, like a human status. So the transformation of the physical feature of a person takes place in the surface of the image. It is there that violence visualizes itself, as Nancy suggests. Torture is thus used to proclaim the enemy is non-human and as such exempted from human treatment, as it looks totally different according to the defected soldier. So the online dimension of the conflict concerns the production of images by opposition forces and counter-images by the regime. While the ruling party can use the opposition-produced images sort of against rebels as described, or eventually it needs to destroy the very image of resistance itself. The viral video of man shooting his own death was I think probably everybody has seen. So, which was an instance of the trope of a lot of similar videos, is an example of the military shooting down the image of the opposition resistance. The soldier shooting down the cameraman is a document of a war over the image. So the opposition, on the other hand, relies on the production of a kind of visual culture that in and of itself aims to challenge and sort of triumph against the ruling party, without which there is no uprising, no revolution, no resistance, and no notion of rights to be challenged or defended. Further, the rebels also exploit this pedagogical use of video as they document and disseminate videos of capturing, torturing, and killing the Syrian army soldiers. So I think there was a video recently of someone sort of eating, some people say the heart, others believe liver of a captured regime soldier. So this imaging of violence on the one hand creates a public arena. I think it's sort of, that everybody has sort of access to, that makes visible the extent of the inflicted violence by simultaneously opening up the possibility of further violence by defining a degree of tolerance in production and viewership of their images. The image constantly reconstitutes the subject that the violence attempts to deform or obliterate. But yet through this dialectical relationship between violence and the image, a different subject is created. The subject is different from one of representational politics, where the constitution or existence of the subject is contingent upon its representation. This visualized and undefined subject is no longer completely the one that it used to be before the eruption of violence, and neither is the new subject that the inflictors of the violence intend to construct. This is an ahistorical one, existing as an image that defines the limits of representation. So this sort of immense repository of war images at times contains more than just instant historization of the events. While these images, for the most part, fulfill a certain journalistic desire to show what happened in a certain place at a certain time, to reveal what was supposed to be hidden, to make visible the crimes and atrocities, so on and so forth, this is certainly only a portion of the flood of participant-produced images. Many of these images drift away from an evidentiary function, shift their focus, look elsewhere, and perform roles other than sole informative imagery. These images become closer to an investigation of possibilities of the medium itself and how it can relate to objects, buildings, people, and the relationship. Videos that, while not discarding realities of war, produce situations where the realities of the war are sort of transmitted through. I just want to show a couple of. First, I want to show this video that I didn't get to show, and this is from Al Jazeera, and you can see here it's sort of amazing collage of citizen sort of captured the crash of a helicopter, and they sort of put them all together in a single clip.
Forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad have focused their efforts on retaking Damascus in the past week. But this has never happened before in Assad's seat of power. Syrian state TV says a government helicopter simply crashed in the Al-Qaboon neighborhood. But activists tell a different story. They say the Free Syrian Army shot it down as it bombed another district.
After shutting down that helicopter, actually these areas are being shelled now violently. People are really horrified, and they are trying actually to go to a safer place, but they don't know how.
The helicopter was reportedly attacking.
So there, in this single report, there's I think 11 different videos, all like go together in this sort of montage. But also, if you go on YouTube on the same date, there are many more. So you can actually really watch this helicopter falling from almost every possible direction. I just want to show a few instances that I feel like these videos are trying to do something else. And this is one that is called Over the Rubble, the Brave Continue to Stand for Freedom. That's like the title of it. And I just want to show it. Don't want to describe it.
والأسد عدو الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله والأسد عدو الله والأسد عدو الله هيك بدنا وهيك صار هيك بدنا وهيك صار هيك بدنا وهيك صار هيك بدنا وهيك صار يا محلى الآخذ بالدار يا محلى الآخذ.
As you can see, it's more like a full-on performance, and we see so. I don't know if you saw, there are two children here, and I think they're masked, these two. So there's like a whole different aspect to this rather than just showing the rubble or the destruction. So it shows that when the destruction of the city, it includes information about its location, but also by turning the site of destruction into a stage, it implies a consciousness with regards to the spectacle of the war and directly points to it. It shows that not only the rebels are using the media to disseminate information and serve as more of like a documentary tool, but are also aware of the medium and its possibilities and complexities. The video is showing not the dead, but the survivors, but does not. So I'm going to show another similar, I mean, not similar, different, but also.
لا لا يا عمو شو عم تعمل؟
عم تصور.
شو عم تصور؟
بيتنا اللي انقصف.
لا يا عمو لا بقولوا عنك مندس.
يقولوا عني مندس أحسن ما يقولوا عني بطة.
I think the title of this one was Child Filming What Remains of His House. And what is really interesting in this one is that, first of all, there's also this performance, because he is sort of like performing this newscaster role of like getting to a site, and I think there's another person there talking to him. I'm not exactly what he says, but I think he says like, please show us what I see, and then he puts up this voice, and as you saw, they actually find it really funny and they laugh. So this is another kind of video that I think is really different from what we usually see. So in the cameraman who's filming the child filming the house approaches the boy as a traditional news media reporter approaches the subject of an interview in a war zone, and he walks toward the boy and he asks, "Can you tell me what you see?" Which also could be sort of, you can see, can you tell me what you're filming? Because they're both filming. The child responds to the question and other questions posed by the man, and as you saw, they're kind of like laugh. It's more like, I think, like also like a spoof and this kind of reportage. Before the era of citizen journalism, the coverage of a similar scenario in the news media would show the child in front of the rubble talking to the cameraman, recounting the events while being questioned by a professional war correspondent. Responding to this, to his mistrust of news media's outlets' coverage of the conflict in Kosovo, Phil Collins traveled to the war zone to investigate their practice in close proximity. In How to Make a Refugee in 1999, Collins follows a group of journalists around Kosovo, covering the war. The piece shows how the group of journalists basically choreographed a family displaced and wounded by the war to produce a news reportage. Capturing the subject's unease with the process, Collins meticulously documents how the journalists examined the wound on the boy's stomach and made him take off his shirt and covered him with flashes. So in the video from Syria, both the child and the other cameraman are filming. The child reflects on the destruction of the house behind the camera, similar to a tourist in front of an ancient ruin. And here, I think it's the boy does not want to be represented, but rather one who would represent, not unlike the journalist. The child is interested in dissecting the site of destruction with a camera to show the extent of the damage, describe what he can see, and highlight this whole economy, but this time does not, he sort of like removes himself from the site. I also think it's, just as a tangent, it's interesting that I think in 1902 in Germany, Friedrich Kittler writes this, that there was a law that gave every man and woman the right to one's own image, and I think that's kind of really interesting and with relation to this. So I think I have to cut a lot. But in a complicated in a sort of like a paragraph towards the end of Little History of Photography, Benjamin asks, isn't the task of the photographer, descendant of Agurus and Aruspices, to reveal guilt and point out the guilty in his pictures? So this latter point stands in contrast to photojournalism, as it's mainly or usually an industry that is mainly preoccupied with picturing the victims. What is more fascinating about Benjamin's question is that he relates the photographer to ancient priests or oracles who had the power to read the future via the study and interpretation of flight of the birds and reading the intestines of sacrificed animals. There were religious officials who observed natural signs, interpreting these as an indication of divine approval or disapproval of a proposed action. These agents had immense political power and at a time decided the fate of the state. Benjamin compares the photographer to interpreters of signs who could not only tell the future, but could also read the will of gods. The magistrate who conducted Agurus rites were directly responsible for peace, good fortune, and well-being of Rome. As such, one can imagine photography as a rigorous study of sort of a formal kind of like semiotics, a study of images that could reveal the guilt but also provide for the possibility of deciding a course of action that may even decide the fate of states. Perhaps it is pointing to this line of study and prophetic properties of photography that Francois Argot concluded his presentation to the Academy of Sciences in 1839 by saying, in this genre, it is only the unexpected that one must particularly. In this genre, it's on the unexpected that one must particularly rely. I think that's it. Sorry.